It's time for Reader-Wrestlermania. I'm your host, Jim Billy Bob Ray, from deep in the bowels of Texas. Is this Wally O'Neill for real?
Jim, what happened to Steve? Jim Billy Bob Ray, how did you get that name?
I'm his doppelganger. I am the Mr. Hyde to Dr. Huneke. I am the...
Oh my God.
Yeah, I am the alter ego. I am Jim Billy Bob Ray.
That's kind of making me a little bit nervous, I've got to say, Jim. Is Steve still with us?
I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, maybe I ate him for dinner.
Oh my God.
I'm not saying I did.
What are you doing here, Jim Billy Bob Ray?
Jim Billy Bob Ray is a phenomenon. I'm the greatest wrestler and reader at the same time in human history.
A reader wrestler?
Yeah. No, yes,
How'd you get your name, Jim?
Oh, everybody asks me that. Okay, well, my mom wanted to call me Jim Bob, and my dad wanted to call me Billy Bob. And they argued about it for a week. And then they finally decided, compromise, let's just call him Ray. And then they thought, that's stupid. We'll just call him Jim Billy Bob Ray. And that's how I got my name.
Oh, it's got a kind of a nice ring to it.
Thank you. Now, Wally, you're supposed to be this great reader, this Renaissance man. Well, I'm telling you, I'm Jim Billy Bob Ray, the greatest reader and wrestler of them all, east and west of the Rio Grande.
Oh.
I'm going to read you a list of books, and you got to show me what you got. First of all, I want to know, have you read this book? Do you got it in your shop among these supposedly 250,000 books?
Supposedly?
And supposedly. I'm a skeptic. Now, I'm a book skeptic. Now, this is your final challenge. This is your final Jeopardy, in fact. You're going to pick out one book and tell me if you're prepared to discuss that book on the spur of the moment. Because if you are not prepared to discuss that book, I'm going to put the iron claw on you.
The iron claw? Oh no,
Saba?
not the iron claw.
Yeah, it's coming, so you better be ready. Are you ready? I said, are you ready?
I'm ready, Jim Billy Bob Ray.
Jim Billy Bob Ray. You can say it fast. Okay.
Jim Billy Bob Ray.
Now, okay, I'm going to read you my list. Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by D. Brown.
Fantastic book, yeah. I know I have a copy here.
Have you read it?
I've read part of it.
Part of it. Okay, you're honest anyway. Profiles in Courage by John F. Kennedy.
Yeah, I have it here.
Have you read it?
I haven't read it.
Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwin Anderson.
I have read it because Steve gave it to me.
Ah, yeah, he would, wouldn't he? Autobiography of Malcolm X.
Yeah.
Have you read it?
I've read part of it, yeah.
Part of it, okay.
It's not doing good here.
All right. The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs.
I haven't.
That's honest. All right. Small is Beautiful by E.F. Schumacher.
Yeah, I've read it.
Have you read The Jesus Dynasty by James Tabor?
Jesus. I haven't.
All right. Do you have any of these books in shop?
I do. I have some of them in stock.
Some of them in stock. All right. How about The Unconscious Civilization by John Ralston Saul?
No, I haven't read anything by Saul.
How about Voltaire's Bastards? Okay, well, you haven't read that either. How about The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Sujana Zuboff?
We recently read that book for the Anarchist Book Club right here in Red Books.
That's true. That's what Steve told me. Now, how about this one? We're going into a classic section. How about Moby Dick by Herman Melville?
You know, Jim Billy Bob Ray,
yeah.
I went through a period where I was voraciously reading classics when I was a young man, and Moby Dick was the only one of them that I ever abandoned halfway through. That chapter on ropes was too much for me.
You don't know what you missed. Now, I could have picked The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, but that's too easy. Everybody's read that book. How about The House of Seven Gables?
I haven't read The House of Seven Gables.
Oh, you're missing something.
But I have it here in the shop.
Good on you, Wally. How about Walden by Henry David
I've read
Thoreau?
Walden, yes.
How about Faust by
Yes.
Johann Wolfgang von Goethe?
Yes.
Capital in the 21st Century by Thomas Piketty.
I haven't read that.
Oh, you got it in the shop.
I don't think I have a copy here at the moment.
Okay, now we'll go on to some Irish authors. How about Full Tilt by Dervla Murphy?
Yeah, a legend. I have it here in the shop.
Have it in the shop. Have you
How to
read
Build a Boat.
How to Build a Boat by Elaine Feeney?
I have that in the shop. I haven't read it.
Okay, how about Secret
Yeah,
Scripture by
yeah.
Sebastian Barry?
Boat.
All right, this one's a tougher one. How about Rule of the Land by Garrett Carr?
No, unfortunately not.
How about Love and
Oh.
Summer and Last Stories by William Trevor?
I love William Trevor, the great short story writer. Well,
He's an amazing
himself
short
and Claire
story
Keegan
writer.
are the
Yeah.
great short story writers of Ireland.
Yeah. How about this one for some deep thinkers? How about Balkan Essays by Hubert Butler?
I haven't read Balkan Essays.
Oh, you
no.
don't know what you're missing there. Okay, now we switch to some eclectic sections on the honor of Eclectic Avenue.
Okay.
How about The Volunteer by Jack Fairweather?
No.
Tao Te Ching by Lao
Of
Tzu.
course, of course.
Okay. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver.
Steve gave it to me, but I didn't read it.
You didn't read it. Oh, I'm going to tell Steve. He's going to be really, really mad. How about Yeats, Selected Poems?
Yeah,
Emily Dickinson, Selected Poems.
yeah.
All right, this one sounds racy, but it's not. It's that deep, thoughtful book. Male Fantasies, Women, Floods, Bodies, and History by Kurt Vonneguts.
No, I haven't read that.
Oh, you don't know what you're missing there. How about The American Home, Architecture and Society, 1815 to 1915 by David P. Hanlon.
I haven't read that.
He's the son of Oscar Hanlon. You know who Oscar Hanlon is?
I don't.
He's one of the best writers on
You're
Irish
whipping me
immigration
here.
in America.
You're whipping me here, Jim Billy Bob.
Okay. All right. This one, I'm going to give you a pass on this one. How about Don Quixote by Cervantes?
I've read Don Quixote, yeah.
Don
It's-
Quixote, yeah.
It's classic. Don Quixote.
Don
Willie
Coyote.
Coyote.
Yeah. How about, okay, this, I'm going to give you another softball. How about Dubliners
Of
by
course.
James Joyce?
Of course.
Okay. This one, you don't have to worry about admitting you didn't read it because I didn't read it either. Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace.
Foster Wallace was brilliant.
I tried
Gone before
to
his time.
read the whole thing, couldn't
Gone
finish
before
it.
its time.
Okay. How about Sombrero Fallout by Richard Brodigan?
I haven't read anything by Brodigan, and I know Steve rates him highly, so I'm going to have to start reading Brodigan.
Brodigan is fantastic. Okay, now you are down to your last book. You haven't one time told me that you are ready to discuss the book at a drop of a hat. So
Okay.
this is your last chance, and if
Oh,
if you're
no.
not ready to discuss this one at the drop of a hat, I'm gonna put the iron claw
the
on
Iron
you.
Claw, oh no.
Here it comes.
Okay.
It's your final Jeopardy.
Okay, let's...
Slaughterhouse 5
Fingers
by
crossed.
Kurt Vonnegut.
Oh yeah, one of my favorites.
Are
I can
you
discuss
ready?
Slaughterhouse
Are you
Five.
ready to discuss that book?
I'm ready to discuss Slaughterhouse 5, Jim Billy Bob Ray.
All right. That's now. Before we go further, it's still Billy Bob Ray, but I'm going to do my best to reconstruct Steve's posh American accent. So just to fool everyone out there in the
So
listeners.
is Steve's accent more posh than yours, Billy Bob Ray?
Yeah, quite a bit, I'd say.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready?
Okay, well, let's get straight into Slaughterhouse 5.
Okay,
I
Wally,
guess
sounds good.
we can't talk about this without talking about the author. Kurt Vonnegut was the author of 14 novels, 3 short story collections, 5 plays, and 5 non-fiction works over 50 years. He was known as a postmodernist, preoccupied with satire, gallows humour, sci-fi, and anti-establishment philosophy, particularly anti-war philosophy, I would say. All this happened, more or less, is the famous opening of Slaughterhouse 5. Slaughterhouse 5 is a 1969 semi-autobiographical, sci-fi-infused anti-war novel. It follows the life of Billy Pilgrim, who has come unstuck in time, moving from being a prisoner of war in the ruined city of Dresden in 1944-45 to being the inmate of a galactic zoo. The book has been called an example of unmatched moral clarity and it is definitely one of my favorites. And I know a lot of the readers who come to the shop, it's one of theirs.
Absolutely, Wally. You mentioned moral clarity, and that's one of the descriptions that came first and foremost in my mind. First of all, the phrase "so it goes" became part of my vocabulary after reading this book, and has been for a half century. To me, it sort of expresses the radical indifference of our times now, especially. But it's so sublime that when you read the book, you fully understand what it means. I'd like to ask you a question, Wally. Do you think that anti-war novels, anti-war literary works of any kind, are futile? Why or why not?
Well, I guess they rarely stop wars, but they do highlight the absurdity of them. And in societies where reading is championed, which unfortunately is in a minority at the moment, they impact the collective unconscious. For myself, Slaughterhouse 5, Catch 22, All Quiet on the Western Front, and even though it's not a book but a film, Threads, they would have had huge impacts on me growing up, and I think it'd be safe in saying that they shaped my views on war. I would consider myself much more a pacifist now than I was as a young man. So yeah, no, I think they can. We have to have that culture of reading for them to get through.
We have to have that culture of reading. As far as like having an effect, I sort of think about a tree growing. Because, one watches a tree on a particular day and thinks, oh, that tree's not growing. But you go away for a few years and come back and you can ask yourself, where did that tree come from? I don't remember that tree looking so big. And this is the kind of, you mentioned glaciers, this is the kind of like slow and steady and powerful effect I think that anti-war literary works can have.
Absolutely. You said the famous Vonnegut saying from the book and from his whole career, I suppose, so it goes. And he keeps coming back to that. Some would say it's a surrender to fatalism. That may be similar to the belief of the aliens in Slaughterhouse 5, and there are aliens in Slaughterhouse 5. We'll get back to whether or not it's a sci-fi novel later, but the aliens are called the Tralfamadorians.
Yeah, I'd say that fast 5 times.
And they have a very, I guess it's a fatalist kind of view on reality, that you can't really change anything. Everything is predetermined. But so it goes. In this age of AI, social media, Steve, Jim, Billy, Bob, Ray, do you think that memes are the new so it goes?
I think that memes are like powerful in a moment, but utterly forgettable. Like an hour later, you won't even remember a meme that you looked at. Whereas like a book like Slaughterhouse 5, you remember that book for decades. So I haven't really thought of memes in that sense. I do remember the first time I was ever exposed to a meme, I thought, wow, this is like something I've never seen before. But now, like anything, when you have such an overabundance and such an overexposure to something, it just ends up numbing a person. One of the things that I found in this book was fascinating was his use of time. You could say, well, it's just a narrative device, right? But his character is actually time traveling, jumping back and forth in time. And I wondered, as I read this, is this more than just a literary device? Is it a metaphor of how we all live in memory? This non-linearity of life, like a shuffling deck of cards, can be a response to trauma. And I believe that if anyone was exposed to trauma, it was Kurt Vonnegut.
Well, trauma survivors often experience memory non-linearly. And I think that comes back to the thing about whether or not Slaughterhouse 5 is a sci-fi novel. For years, for decades, and even now, it's featured in the Sci-Fi Masterwork series, which many great literary works are, and but it was seen as a pulp sci-fi novel, something that, back in the 60s and 70s, the educated shouldn't be reading, which we now.
Oh, I remember those kind of people.
We now don't look at it, but those people miss the connection between, as you say, trauma and non-linear time. They miss that critique of patriot nationalism in the book.
Oh, it's very strong.
He's really using those sci-fi tropes get across another message, like you say.
One of the most beautiful moments in this book, and speaking of like skipping time or non-linear time, this is actually a reversal of time, is when he has the episode of Billy Pilgrim stumbling on a documentary of a World War II bombing mission. And because Billy has these extrasensory amazing powers, he sees the whole film backwards. And so the narrative describes a bombing raid in World War II going backwards. And instead of destroying all the buildings and killing a lot of people, it's actually like regenerating everything and bringing people back to life, literally springing them out of the rubble and having them like living again. And
it very briefly creates a world where humanity deserves redemption and then immediately takes it away again.
Yeah, but I thought this moment was such a powerful way to describe the horror and futility of war, and in a way that had never even previously imagined. And the other thing, you talk about moral clarity in your introduction. The scenes of Germany in late 1944 are so vivid. They're prosaically real and devoid of propaganda. Vonnegut has done an amazing trick here because he's in the book, he's in the story himself as a character, while he's also the author and narrator of the whole story. So he'll say something like, "Oh, and by the way, I was there among that group of people." I was
there, the famous one. I guess, Vonnegut goes out of his way not to bring any vilification or propaganda into the book. Obviously, Germany pays its comeuppance for the Holocaust, but at the same time, the ruined Germany feels human and exhausted. And there's that famous story that Vonnegut tells himself about when he was brought out of the bunker after the firebombs. Everything was ruined, and the German soldiers brought himself and the other, because Vonnegut was a prisoner of war, of course, in Dresden during that terrible 3 days firebombing. And when they were brought back up to the surface, everything was gone. And he maintains that had the shoe been on the other foot and they were in America, he would have killed the Germans. And he says they looked after him. Now, of course, he was working and they had to do terrible things in those days. They had to burn bodies, and it was just hell on earth. But it's interesting, and you could see why Vonnegut, because before that he was very gung-ho. He was the typical all-American guy going off to war, and from that moment he became this lifelong pacifist. Yeah,
I find that revenge is the darkest impulse of humanity, and the whole world's been witnessing this in Gaza, for example, just an act of horrendous revenge. In Slaughterhouse 5, it is some of the American soldiers and not the German soldiers and civilians who are vengeful. But Nazi ideology features vengeance, but the civilians and ordinary soldiers in this story are not vengeful. And he also brings up the idea of how vengeance had a big role in dropping the atomic bomb. It was payback for Pearl Harbor.
Well, the misuse of ideas to create new morals and new enemies often dehumanizes the user as much as their enemy seems in their eyes. Would you say, Steve, that there's maybe greater morality in defeat and loss than there is in victory?
Oh, I think oftentimes that happens because sometimes victims become perpetrators, but sometimes victims actually learn something sorrowful and say, I don't want anybody else to repeat what I've gone through.
Yeah. No, it's
Do you think that the statements by high IQ war criminal American traitor Howard W. Campbell about Americans have turned out to be true in 2026 in the Trump area especially? Do you recall his descriptions of how Americans were basically losers in the economy?
I do. I actually took note of them. What he said was, Americans are unique in that poor citizens are conditioned to hate themselves, harbour a deep disdain for poor people, and passionately revere the rich. And that certainly seems as true today as it was when Vonnegut wrote it in the 1960s.
Yeah.
But Campbell is a fascinating character because, of course, he's the main character in Mother Night, So Vonnegut reuses a lot of these characters and a lot of these themes, and he's clearly based on Lord Haha, William Joyce, as a kind of a fictional American version of Lord Haha. So it's really interesting where he goes with that in Mother Night.
Yeah. When I look at these characters, I look at this story, it's really hard for me to think of it as a science fiction novel. I just find it to be a transcendent book.
Yeah.
As you said, covering more than one genre, but almost like superseding them.
But it's fascinating that, like, as a society, not everybody, but as a society, we binge watch the Kardashians and the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or Hollywood or whatever, while people sleep in tents. And nationalism is now almost like sport, like entertainment, and identity, whether it's our politics or whether it's our own personal identity, seems to be performance. Nobody knows what's real anymore, and it's very disturbing. I'd love to know what Vonnegut would say if he was around. I think there's, and you probably think this, Jim Bob, Billy Bob Ray, we really lack people like Vonnegut now. We need him. Like, what would Vonnegut say about the Trump regime?
Yeah, I not only read several of Vonnegut's like popular novels and so on, I also read some of his memoir work where he got together with like soldiers from Germany who had been like on the other side of the war, and how they rode around in buses together on tours, and so he was such a voice for sanity. Sometimes a little bit ribald and so on, but he's always for sanity. He would be quite a gentle person, and never somebody who would be brutal and aggressive. There's one more thing I'd like to bring up, and that is basically the scene. I hope we're not spoiling this for anyone, and I won't.
We should say spoiler alert.
We probably will. But the scene with Bertram Copeland Rumford in the hospital room that he shares with Billy Pilgrim, that is just brilliant, because Rumford has this intellectual history and sort of a justification for the firebombing of Dresden. And all of a sudden, this voice on the other side of the hospital room says, "I was there in Dresden." And that's a moment of official history versus truth. The scene is worthy of Herman Melville, actually. It's just an amazing moment in this book.
Yeah, it's an incredible scene, all right. There's so many incredible scenes in this book, though, isn't there? I mean, we were talking earlier about I can't think of his first name, Derby, the
oh yeah
who was killed for violating an order.
That's just amazing. He's stealing a teapot, but no one seems to be held accountable for firebombing Dresden, which killed 135,000 people.
Yeah,
and there was no justification for that in Vonnegut's eyes.
So violating an order is worse than violating your own personal morality, and we I guess it's a tricky subject, but we see that. We've seen that in Ireland so much.
Yeah.
Like here, Steve, up until 1993, you would be jailed for being a homosexual. Now, no one could imagine that now in this day. No one could imagine that. But the people who were alive at that stage, the people who were jailing those people they're still around.
Yeah.
It's quite incredible. We also had the mother and baby homes, and people say, "Oh my God, that could never happen," but these people are still alive. Families put people into these places. It's just a change in. It's not even morality. It's almost the perception of what is moral.
Yeah.
Changes over times.
Yeah.
And people will just go with what that perception is rather than the morality itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but I always come back to that thing that, we need moral satirists now more than ever, not comedians and not culture war pundits. Because beneath Vonnegut's humor was compassion, there was grief, there was moral seriousness. And modern satire, it lacks that. And modern satire increasingly doesn't punch upwards, it punches downwards.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It's used to divide us rather than tackling those those big issues like Vonnegut did. And Vonnegut was consistently throughout his career distrusted all political spheres and institutional narratives. Whereas now, online systems reward outrage, tribalism, and emotional escalation.
And dehumanization.
Yeah, absolutely. And now reality outpaces parody, of course.
Yeah.
How could Vonnegut operate in a world where Trump is tweeting the things he tweets? He's not even tweeting them because he's not allowed on that. Yeah, it's quite incredible. And to go back to one thing that Vonnegut once said, satire became impossible when Henry Kissinger won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Which is just a complete shock.
A very valid point. But, you know, I would really recommend, and I'm sure you would, Steve,
Billy Bob Ray.
I'd recommend Slaughterhouse 5 to anybody who hasn't read it. Don't mistakenly think it's just a sci-fi novel, and I'm a huge fan of sci-fi, but this is far beyond. It is a great work of fiction, and there's a reason it's constantly top of cult book lists. The idea of being stuck in time, so prevalent to us now, because in a way we're stuck in reality. We're living in a world with algorithmic feeds, fragment attention, doom scrolling, and the common person, Billy Bob Ray,
yeah.
They can watch Gaza, they can watch a cat video, economic collapse, an ad for Viagra, and the president threatening nuclear Armageddon all within 30 seconds. And that is just beyond anything Kurt Vonnegut could have imagined.
We're getting so much pressure and stress on us now. And speaking of pressure and press, I just couldn't keep up that posh American accent anymore.
Well, I'm glad you're back with that accent, Billy Bob Ray, because I've got one other point to make to you about Slaughterhouse 5 before we leave the topic.
And I got one more point myself. Go ahead.
Well, this is a big one. I grew up, and as I said at the start when I was introducing Steve, I used a lot of American media for a reason. I mentioned Knight Rider, Airwolf, all those great shows I grew up with in the 1980s. And I've told Steve this many times, that people like me who grew up in the 80s and 90s in Ireland, we look to America as being the great light on the hill, the heroes, the guardians of the free world. And I got a rude awakening when I finally visited America in 2002. Americans are great people, and America is a great country, but it's not the light on the hill. The same as nowhere is the light on the hill. The good guys narrative is dead here. Like the idea that Vonnegut doesn't try to cling to that previous war novels where America is the good guy, the Allies are the good guys. He portrays what happened in Dresden, which was a war crime. No, there's no other way to look at it. And that was revolutionary in 1969. Whereas now, modern audiences increasingly distrust the simplistic geopolitical narratives. So things have changed, but Vonnegut was well ahead of the time there.
Great writers, great philosophers are often living decades ahead of their time. And I've got one more thing I want to say before we go. First of all, Wally, congratulations. I don't have to put the iron claw on you.
Oh, great.
You really
so
came
happy.
through. But true story, I have been to Cody, Wyoming. I did forget to ask for Wild Bob, though. So it goes.
So it goes.
Thank you, Wally, for being on Reader-Wrestlermania.
Thank you, Billy Bob Ray, and you have been listening to myself and Billy Bob Ray right here on Wexford New People's Movement Radio discussing Slaughterhouse 5 by Kurt Vonnegut.